Okay, welcome to the first part of a two-part sub-series within the crash course for Android native development using Kotlin and Jetpack. Today we're going to be talking about retrofit. Now that we have an application up and running, an app for Android using Kotlin and Jetpack, and that's what I showed you in my previous videos, we are now ready to start expanding on this. And what I want to show you next is how to set up something called Retrofit, which will allow you to make web service calls, basically HTTP calls to a web service that has been exposed somewhere. In my case, I've got my own application that's hosted on Heroku as well as locally, two different versions, and I want to access an endpoint, an HTTP get or post or whatever request you want. I want to access one of these endpoints to in this case I'm going to just do a get to show you some data that is stored on my server application, again hosted on Heroku. And yeah, so the first thing you need to do though is you actually have to include the dependencies, which is usually the first thing you need to do. So inside of my build.gradle file in my root directory, I'm going to specify 3 new version numbers properties. So the one is for retrofit, and the one is for retrofit coroutines adapter, because with Kotlin there's such a thing as coroutines, which I won't go through what those are now, but there's a coroutines adapter so that you can use those with retrofit. And then another thing called Moshi. So Moshi will see, you don't have to use Moshi, but it's a really convenient dependency to have for marshalling and unmarshalling data, and packaging it up into objects and stuff like that. It provides converters and things. So we'll have a look at that, and you'll also see some reference to something called OKHTTP. That is not a dependency we have to include explicitly. Retrofit uses OKHTTP, and we can use it directly in some cases as well. We'll have a look at that. Might not be in this video, might be in future videos, because I'll show you, in this video I'm going to show you the basic setup, but I will in a future video show you how to use OAuth 2 as well with retrofit. So yeah, get authentication and stuff like that going up. Okay, and then inside of my other build.gradle, the app one, I'm going to now include the actual dependencies, which use my version Moshi, version retrofit, and version retrofit coroutines adapter properties. So that's it for setting up the dependencies. That's the first step, and now we can start looking at some code. Oh, of course, you would have to click sync now to actually pull them down, but I won't bore you with waiting for that. Okay, so I'm going to create a new package called network, just directly in the root of my source package, and I'm just going to dump everything in here for now around this retrofit stuff and everything. So I'm going to create a new Kotlin class, and this is for our actual API service. So the application we're going to be integrating with, the one we're going to be pulling data from, the remote application, is called Bifrost. So I'm going to call it Bifrost API service. And I already have code here for it. Okay, just taking it from one of my other projects, and we'll step through it. Okay, so now that I've just removed that other code, we can start stepping through it. Alright, so the first thing to note here is I've just defined a constant for the URL of the application I'm going to be pulling data from, so like the server application. And in this case, in reality, I've actually got this as a Heroku URL, but for now I'm just going to show you that you can do it with your local host as well. I've got a very specific URL in there, and that's just for the server application that's actually running on the same machine that I'm working on right now. Okay, but if you were running it on Heroku or something, it would be that URL. And of course you could be using another server that's another API that's got nothing to do with you. It's external kind of third-party thing, and then you just put in their URL there. So pretty standard stuff. And an important thing to note here is that we're not using HTTPS, and that will actually cause a bit of an issue, which there is a workaround for. So let me just quickly show you that before we move on here. Okay, so because we're not using HTTPS, when you actually try to run this stuff a little bit later, you would get an error around the connection not being secure. So let me show you how to deal with that error, since you might run into it as I did. So what you need to do is, inside of your res directory, you're going to create a new package for this. Well, I'm going to just call new resource directory, just called XML, and I'm going to, inside of that, create another new XML file, and this new XML file is going to be called network underscore security underscore config.xml. Okay, and inside of that, I'm just going to do the text option, remove all that stuff. Okay, very simple. You've got a network security config element, and we're allowing clear text traffic for this specific subdomain. So this over here, 192.168.0.6, for me, that's not necessarily, that's not going to be the same IP that you'd be using or whatever, but if for your local, whatever your machine's IP address is, it's just got to match, that's all. And that'll work around this error you would get if you were using an HTTP instead of HTTPS URL, and yeah, that'll sort that out for you. Okay, so let's just carry on now. Actually, yes, sorry, it won't actually sort it out just yet. So now we've created the network security config XML. I just forgot we have to define it in our Android manifest to tell it that that's the security config to use. So that's quite easy to do. We just go inside Android manifest.xml, and we create a new line with the following on. There it is, Android network security config, and then add XML, because that's the name of the resource directory I put it in, and then the name of the XML file, and that will sort it out for you. Alright, so now let's move on to actually looking at this code, not in full detail. I'm not going to explain every single thing, but for the most part, just to give you a feel for what I'm doing in the code for the API service, and then we can start resolving these errors that we have, the things that are missing. Okay, so the first thing I've already explained, that's just the base URL, and the next thing to look at is this Moshi object that we've created. We're using the Moshi builder. So this we're going to just use as a converter, basically to to take the data that we receive from our external service, our external web service, server application, whatever you want to call it, and actually just package it up into objects that we could work with instead of just disparate pieces of data. So it's basically used for like almost marshalling and unmarshalling of objects that we are, sending across the wire. And what I've had to do here, and we'll see this class later, is because one of the pieces of data that I want is a date, that's actually a date and a time for when the reading was taken, for when this, in our case, we're dealing with the application that I started previously, which is to look at water levels of something, whatever it is that you've got your IoT device hooked up to. And what we're going to get is basically like a water level back in centimeters and a date and time for when that level was taken. But now this default converter doesn't have the ability to convert dates appropriately when the date is part of the object that it is marshalling or unmarshalling. So we have to actually write our own class for that. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so I'm going to create that class. Okay, alright, so yeah, I suppose you could actually even just do that. Alt enter, create class. There we go. Extract a separate file, yes please. and yeah, we can put it inside network. Okay, so let's create the class, and I've got this code ready. Alright, so data is millis from epoch JSON adapter. So what this will basically allow us to do is the conversion. So it's got a method that you've got to implement from JSON. So remember, JSON is JavaScript object notation. So that's what I'm working with here. That's what the messages to and from the server are being sent as. They're being sent in JSON formats instead of like XML or something like that. They're in JSON. And then what we've got is you basically define a from JSON method, which just takes the string that you get from the reader, and it's actually a long value. That's what we're sending across, and that value represents the amount of milliseconds, seconds or milliseconds, I can't remember the unit now, that have passed. I think, yeah, that have passed. Let's have a look. Yeah, okay, yeah, it's that have passed into the epoch. And you just wrap that in a data object. Basically, there's a constructor that takes it in, and that'll create the date for you. And then you've got to also override a toJSON method, which basically does the opposite. So these are the methods for marshalling and unmarshalling that you specify. Okay, so that's going to give our, if we go back here, our Moshi converter the ability to convert dates as well, and we've got rid of one error now. So that's a good start. Thanks for watching. I hope that you've found this useful so far, and please remember to watch part 2 of the Retrofit crash course. And yeah, and if you want more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.